I mean, we're talking about the land itself. That that production has to continue on if there is going to be land reform. You won't, the land is not an exception. It's no different than a factory. You're not going to seize it without the people who are working it. That's
I disagree that it's the same as a factory, because a factory is a constant form of capital, or it's a specific form of means of production that is reducible to its parts. Land just refers to space in the abstract. It doesn't even necessarily refer to arable land. It just refers to livable space.
What he's talking about here, I mean, it's correct that the factory is specifically designed for production. But if we're talking about, his demand said land reform and dismantle big agriculture. And agriculture itself is is the production of land. The factory is a newer form of, in the context of all of humanity. It's a more developed form of what creates production. But nevertheless, we're still material beings bound by the material world. We have to eat food. And that's the point I keep trying to bring to him here, is that just like you wouldn't leave a factory empty just so that whoever owns the factory, doesn't own it anymore. You can't just leave farmland empty and wait till somebody who doesn't have experience in agriculture, to come along and work it. Our concern, though, as a whole, has to be the food production that comes from agriculture. If we want to dismantle big agriculture, we have to be able to provide a alternative, a realistic alternative to what big agriculture is. You can't just wait until small farm owners, finally, enough people want to get into farming to where now, it doesn't get, the land is not given to the people who work it,
Which there's a lot of variations.
agricultural land where we get our food from. It's being picked by
Yeah, but even when it comes to how we grow food, there's different methods for the production of food based on the different levels of mechanization. Whereas a factory is reducible to the parts of the factory. That's why when it comes to the question of land reform, it is never just immediately turning it into a cooperative.
So here he says it's never just immediately turning it into a cooperative. Like it's on the people who work it. They're the ones who manage it. Whatever the new political forces, the revolutionary state, does not need to worry about how people are managing their food supply. We need to worry about how food is getting to the people as a whole. That's what we will have to do. If he's saying they never do that, he's like observing as a he's making a political observation, maybe a historical observation, that people don't have cooperatives, that people are that once somebody owns land, that right now even small farm owners don't work cooperatively with each other, in their small farms. We don't see that here. When they do, I mean, he's kind of micromanaging, the actual farm production itself, when that's not necessarily his job. I mean, his job is, as a Marxist-Leninist, if he's as a political force, if he's trying to provide an alternative, his job is to make sure that they grow the food and it gets distributed. That's supposed to be his job. There's room for capitalism to develop on the farm, because the farm can't keep up with the factory. It cannot produce. We can't constantly, increase, the output of machinery by hand. It is limited to this amount. This is why this land has to belong to the people who work it, to where they have to own their own production to engage in free capitalism, to engage in the free market. But we can't do that under a capitalist state, because the capitalist state is what gives us corporate state ownership over agriculture, big agriculture.
First, there is a general land reform, which kind of parcelizes land and redistributes it away from nobles to people. And later the question comes, okay, how is that land managed, or how is it owned, or how is it held?
I don't know how exactly we're going to parcel this out. Maybe you would have to take it up with the standing state. But if he's saying that, then we worry about ownership, or management and ownership, later. But the food, it can't be later, because when the way food works is that, you have 1 year to grow a whole yield of food, and that determines everybody's nutrition. The ownership, if we want to dismantle big agriculture, the ownership, you're not going to have leverage to do that unless you have a redistribution of ownership over the land by the farm producer themselves. Who are you parceling land out to? We need a production of agriculture. There could be housing reform. There could be, even land, where people are housed if they move to the country. There you could still have that, but you cannot lose your production. You cannot lose your food production, or you will not have political support. People are not going to, politically support something that deprives them of food. That where the outcome, no matter if we talk about how we do it, if the outcome is that they're not getting the food supply that they had under big agriculture, they're going to be like, no, we want big agriculture because at least we had food. It's better at distribution than Marxists saw and Hazard while they debate about this.
Held. That's always a later question. So there's a primacy of the land question over all of the other ones because the land question is not reducible to a competing model of management, like a factory. Okay, we have the same factory, we just want different management. That's kind of the cooperative workers' ownership of the means of production meme. Land reform is more fundamental because it's about a fundamental redistribution of an immovable and eternal form of wealth.
And so again, he talks about what a factory is in comparison to what land is, and it's true that a factory is a more developed, it's a more recent development in production that humanity has developed, whereas land has always existed way before us. A factory is basically it's like compacting production into a smaller amount of land. Like it is land. I mean, a factory is sitting on land. So when you compact all of this, you could keep redesigning it and remolding it and redeveloping and developing it to increase your production. There's more there's more room for development of the factory because land does is a lot more permanent. But this is why I say that that there's still room for capitalism to develop in the land, right, or in agriculture, because once you remove like the landlordism that is big agriculture, that is corporate agriculture ownership over the land, because the land can't outproduce the factory. If you own your land, that's it. Like if you have a factory in a land, and say an acre worth of factory, it's a big factory maybe, but also an acre worth of land, the factory will always produce more at market value than the land will. Then the land will produce at market value. This is why there's room for free market, but we have to remove landlordism. We have to remove, which is big agriculture. We have to remove that from the farm in order to have this. But because society has to continue on, you cannot remove that from big agriculture without the people who currently work the land that give big agriculture its hegemony anyway. Because you have to continue on society. You have to, and so therefore it is, and this is why I say that the right to conquest, the right to property, which is just only nothing physically enforcing that except for a state, that the right to conquest is alienable, but the right to production is not. The right to production will always be held by the people. It is their way to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it's for this reason that this production has to continue on, so that society continues on, without big agriculture, without the former organization of ownership over agriculture. It has to be given to the people that work now. That ownership has to be given to them now. And they will take that and use it in market competition, whether it be through subsidizing from a new revolutionary state, or whether they're feeding people locally at a local market. We need the people to be fed. We need the people to be healthy. That's our concern as the political force that would be a revolutionary state.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the productive aspect of land. Like, have you seen somebody who, like, say, picks leeks? Like, they have to crawl on the ground and just rip, pull.
Yeah.
And like, it's the vast majority of people who don't do that work aren't like it. In the case that
but the methods. Here's what I'm trying to say. Okay, here's what I'm trying to say. Methods of production within agriculture always change. There's machines that take that kind of labor, which may take, like, let's say it's 5 minutes per leak, can turn it into fucking like 5 milliseconds per leak, right? That's happened many times before in history with the mechanization of agriculture.
So here he kind of goes like goes against what actually makes, you know, a factory different from the land. These developments he's talking about, you know, that have happened all throughout history, have all been developed because of the factory. Whether we're talking about irrigation system, whether we're talking about tractors, this has all been the factory that has developed this stuff. The land itself is permanent, you know, like he was saying earlier. It's been here forever, and like something that, say, was a development in agriculture between now and, say, the Soviet Revolution, you know, that I could think of is that now, you know, farmers no longer plow land. You know, now in the United States, now in the, you know, even in the 90s, farmers that would plow in the spring, you know, have all moved to cover crops in the winter, because cover crops, you know, keep the soil fertile. It keeps, whereas plowing flips the soil over and leaves all those microbes and mycorrhizal fungi to sit out in the sun, which kills them and kills all the fertility in your soil. The point is, though, that he says these developments, you know, he says, you know, coming through and picking leaks. Maybe he's talking about some robots that could sit there and identify what part of a leak needs to be shelled, and they could just do this really fast. But what I'm saying is that a demand for this sort of technology is not going to exist at this rate that we're under big agriculture. That, you know, but it would be the factory that develops something even that great, even that awesome. You know, when he's got it kind of backwards about what makes the factory different from the farm, and what the farm and the factory have in similarity in relevance to production. The farm is not where you're going to get all this development for agriculture. That comes from the factory. That comes from what is now the John Deere factory, you know, under, you know, the name John Deere, right? I mean, it's the John Deere proletariat that makes tractors better, that makes tractors more in demand, that you know, they're the ones that actually develop the tractor repetitively in a quantitative, you know, in a quantitative leap until it moves to a qualitative leap and a better tractor is developed. You could do that with the factory because the factory is specifically designed for this kind of production. I'd like to show somebody the video that Brian Berletic has of the agricultural development that has, you know, there's like a drone, and they go through, you know, they don't even have to have a tractor. They use a drone to go through, and whether it's pesticide or whatever it is that they need to put on the plants. Farmers here would love that, but they don't have it, and it's because of big agriculture. And so there will have to be the small farm owner, if they will have to choose a side between big agriculture and the agricultural proletariat. And which includes the fact that 50% of the agricultural proletariat in the United States is undocumented, and 73%, that's according to Department of Labor, and 73% is born outside of the United States according to USDA. They will have to unite with that to actually get rid of big agriculture, because big agriculture's hegemony comes from its, you know, its production and its state hegemony over its productive forces, which, you know, is through by means of, you know, like state organs like ICE.
With the mechanization of agriculture. But the reason land reform matters is not to, you know, reorganize the management of the same kind of labor. It is about redistributing property at the most fundamental level, like ownership. Who owns it?
So, you know, here he says ownership, who owns it. So that is the redistribution of property. Now I'm trying to move forward to the production that, you know, that is agriculture, that makes that property productive.
Not who manages the same form of labor. Who owns the fundamental means of production? Who has a piece of the pie? Who has a stake in the polity and in the state?
So he keeps moving around between this word manages and owns. When whoever owns manages. I mean, it's he kind of moves. I think he keeps. So later on in this, you're gonna see, and probably in the next, the part 2 of this, you're gonna see he keeps trying to like bring in this imaginary rad lib or this like invisible like rad lib into our debate as like a third party to make it out like they just want like a cooperative under capitalism and then to not involve themselves in the state like. And he does this also by like you'll see what he does this whole time. I'm just specifically talking about how the scientific process would be to dismantle big agriculture, and he keeps bringing in this extra narrative like. But here is like kind of the more like basic way that he does this is he keeps changing the word ownership to management and then management to ownership, as if like the corporate state, as if the corporate state ownership that they would ever give their management to their workers. This is obviously not the issue. Like the issue is the ownership over the land and how society continues on with this new ownership over the land. That's what I'm trying to get to here, but we'll see.
Right? Economically.
What,
That's what land reform is about.
Would that not belong? Would that not belong to the people who work the land now? I mean, is that
not necessarily? No, not necessarily.
No.
Thank you, Lionel. Not necessarily, because the people who work the land, for example, could be working it with methods that are outdated but are kept in place. For example, this is a limited example, because of a monopoly that doesn't want to adapt or something, right? Or it could be that they're displaced geographically from their homes where they actually would live and be a part of their communities. This is the case with migrants because they're being exploited by big agriculture.
So I want to point out here that these two examples, they're deferring, and you'll see he'll always keep referring to the first one, even though I am talking about the second one. But he says the first one is a monopoly that doesn't want to adapt. That's obviously big agriculture, The second one is people who are displaced, which he says here is the like the migrant agricultural workers, which makes up 50% of which undocumented migrant workers make up 50% of our agricultural proletariat in the United States, according to Department of Labor. So it's like these are the two people who for some reason can't see. It's weird. It's the bourgeois and the proletariat. Like it's the rural bourgeois and the proletariat. He's only leaving the petty bourgeois farming, the small farm owner. He's only leaving that, or anybody who wants to get into small farming. Anybody who doesn't have any experience in agriculture but wants to get into small farming. I suppose that's also who he's talking about. This would obviously not be very timely in the case of, removing big agriculture as an objective, in the continuing of society. When in reality, whether he likes it or not, right now, this monopoly has state power. Whether he likes it or not, the second makes up the majority of its productive forces, that he talks. The second class makes up the majority of the productive forces. This is the whole reason I called in. This is the whole reason I started this debate with them in the first place.
So no, it's not necessarily true. Land can be worked in different ways. There's not one. See, the perspective you're giving me, it kind of sounds like the perspective from the monopoly capitalist.
Like he's speaking about it as if whoever is owning the land is the form of the agriculture and how it's being how the production is carried out. When it's not, like we're talking about what specific class of people, or at least I'm trying to talk about what specific class of people seizes the land, and obviously I'm trying to go further into the actual conditions of that class, right? But he keeps saying that he says it doesn't have to be this one way, as if like migrant farm workers somehow have a entirely different way of production than people who are citizens of this, currently have the citizenship under the policy of the U.S. government as of now. Like it's, that somehow changes because someone's a migrant. It changes the way that the production is done. He keeps appealing to the state's law, like the current state's law, as an overlying factor in dismantling big agriculture, which is the state itself. He keeps trying to act like the reason why migrants can't be given, like, or our agricultural proletariat, who is largely migrant, can't be given ownership over the land is because of the current current conditions and the current U.S. state policy. It's like, oh no, the U.S. government doesn't want us doing that. Like, doesn't want us, seizing the means of production from big agriculture by means of its proletariat. We better not do that because the U.S. government doesn't like that.
According to which, there's one way to work the land and organize the land and use the land, and that merely can only be changed managerially. And I fundamentally disagree with that. Again,
with the word manager, like management and ownership, again with this, I am talking about ownership the entire time, and I've made that clear from the beginning. When he compares it to slavery, I say, like, the current migrant labor conditions to slavery, I said, well, it wouldn't be slavery if they owned the land. That's not slavery if you own the land. That's not just management. That's ownership. That's what the state is itself. The organized coercion point that protects ownership over property. That's what the state does.
Well, I think like how you might be seeing how I'm speaking about this as if the enslavement that is the migrant farm, like, being a migrant farm worker who could be placed in ice camps, right? Who is in a situation like that it's permanently that way. That it can only that's the only way they could ever work the land.
When you're talking about redistributing land,
our U.S. government has them.
But when you're talking about redistributing land to the people who work it, that redistribution will entail a revolutionizing of the method of production, and the redistribution is also fundamentally political.
But he doesn't make clear why our current U.S. agricultural proletariat, why it's not included in these things. He speaks about this as if, like, well, we can't do that with migrants because of U.S. citizenship policy. Like, he's kind of going off into a dream about beautiful agriculture, excluding of the people who actually, do the agriculture.
So are you talking about making them sovereign citizens of the sovereign United States, where they're going to be entitled to a certain amount of acres of land? If so, why would it have to be the land they're working now when they're not going to be working it in the same way if they themselves owned it?
Why would it have to be the same way?
Why would it have to be the same land that they work now when they're not going to be working it in the same way?
Because this is the same land that the capitalists picked out that said, this is where I want to grow food. This is
I know, but the capitalists picked out, yeah, I get that. But the capitalists, hold on, but the capitalists have that method of production, large-scale agriculture, only as a result of their monopoly over the land.
It's like he's referring to land being something different than, like, we're going to develop land where we get all new kind of land. Like, it's no longer dirt. It's this new kind of like foam that could, like, somehow has all the nutrition we need, that we're going to develop that. Or why would our agricultural proletariat even need that land? Like, why, when we could totally develop this new, like, padding that goes over the ground that grows food out of it. Whatever development he's talking about, and you'll hear me say, is, I have no doubt, or once our agricultural proletariat, is able to disarm the big agriculture of its land, that they will be more than capable of all these developments he's talking about in due time, in time, quicker than it ever could under this. And that's what he keeps saying, that the monopoly over the land is hindering these developments. And so we're trying to move past that. He keeps being stuck on it, almost like he's having a pity party about the development. He's having this like sadness about the agriculture is not being developed fast enough, instead of talking about how to actually disarm the monopoly over the land from the land.
If you had a reparcelization of land, there would be a different method of production, not just a different management of production. That's what I'm trying to get across. I have no doubt. See, my
I have
problem,
no
with,
doubt that the
my problem
agriculture.
with many socialists in the United States is that it seems like they want to preserve monopoly capitalism, but they just want a different arrangement of management. They don't want to fundamentally destroy the monopolies and reparcelize the economy. They want to keep all of the corporate monopolies in place.
So if I make a part two, we'll get more into this, and but like this is kind of what he does a lot during the rest of the thing. So I'll see, if there's anything there for me to even talk about. It's where he kind of like he keeps bringing up socialists in the United States and the left and like moralists and like all this stuff, everything but our agricultural proletariat and our agricultural bourgeoisie. Everything but that. Like it's what we keep in the agricultural bourgeoisie state organs. And that all just gets dismissed as moralism, but or he was the one with the demand to end big agriculture. So that's what I called about. I mean, we'll talk about it. There'll be more in here, and we'll see. I'll see what's in the rest of this interview or rest of this debate, and I'll break things down from there too. But for now, I think this will be the first video of this. So well, thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium. All of these are Marxist. You can follow me there. You can y'all can hit me up there. Let me know what you think below in the comments. And thank y'all for tuning in. And that'll go.